If someone leaves a treasure chest wide open in front of you, are you the kind who shuts it or the kind who takes just one coin? Evelyn Hart's voice echoed in her private office, not in speech, but in memory. Her own question posed weeks ago to a psychologist during a discreet executive consultation. Back then, she hadn't liked the silence that followed. It said more than an answer. Now, at 11:47 p.m., the lights of downtown Chicago glinted through the glass walls of the 43rd floor, casting sharp streaks of silver across the room. A fireproof safe, half open, stood beside the bookshelf. Inside, stacks of bills banded crisp, and one envelope purposefully poking out just far enough to invite curiosity. Evelyn reclined in her leather armchair, a silk scarf loosely draped over her eyes. But she wasn't asleep. Her breaths were slow, deliberate. Every muscle was still. She had staged this moment like a play. The actors were about to enter. Footsteps. One light and unhurried, the other smaller, skipping. A keycard beeped at the main door. "Come on, Mace. Stay close," came a deep, gentle voice. "Can I wear the gloves, Dad?" the boy whispered. "You got 'em," the father chuckled. "Yup, my orange ones. They make me look like a real helper. Then suit up, buddy." The door eased shut behind them. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't need to. Otis Walker, her janitor of 2 years, never missed a night, never asked for a raise, never socialized, always polite. Too polite. She had once thought like a man with something to hide. Tonight, she would find out what. Evelyn listened as the soft rustle of gloves being tugged over small hands met her ears. "You start with the doorknobs." "Mace." "I'll handle the floor," Otis said. The boy's sneakers padded closer to her office. "Mason. 8, maybe 9. Skinny, soft-spoken, but with eyes that seemed to take in more than most adults. Evelyn had watched him through the security feed before, fascinated by the way he lined up his pencils, how he never interrupted when adults spoke, and how he always said thank you, even to vending machines. Now, he was right outside the glass wall of her office. He hesitated. Evelyn could sense it. He pushed the door open gently. Evelyn's chair creaked slightly, but she didn't stir. 1 breath. 2. Whoa. Mason's voice fell into a hush. His steps were slow now, the kind of slow kids used when they knew they weren't supposed to touch, but their hands tingled anyway. The safe gleamed under the ceiling lights. Mason's sneakers stopped 2 feet from it. "Dad," he called softly. No answer. "Dad, there's money in here." Evelyn felt her pulse pick up, just a little. Then silence. 30 seconds, a minute, and then papers shuffled. She tensed. But what came next wasn't what she expected. "These are all mixed up," Mason murmured. He wasn't pocketing anything. He wasn't backing away either. Evelyn dared to peek just a sliver through the edge of her scarf. There he was, Mason, kneeling in front of the safe, sorting the bills. 50s to one side. Hundreds stacked neatly. Bent corners smoothed gently by his little gloved hands. His face, furrowed lips pressed in concentration, like he was solving a puzzle. Evelyn's throat tightened. "Mom says money should always be tidy," he whispered to himself, "even if it's not ours." A rustle of a janitor's cart rolled in the hallway. "Miss, where'd you go?" Otis called, not loud, but cautious. "I'm here, Dad," Mason replied. "Someone left their safe open. I'm just fixing it." Otis appeared in the doorway a moment later, his shoulders immediately stiffening. "Mason," he said low but sharp. "Step away. Now." "But, Dad, it was messy. Son, now." Mason stood up slowly. "I didn't take anything. I just organized it, like you do with our rent money." Otis's eyes flicked from the open safe to Evelyn in the chair to the boy's trembling hands. "I believe you," he said quietly. "Let's finish up." "No," Evelyn said, lifting the scarf from her eyes. Both Otis and Mason froze. She stood slowly, each click of her heels deliberate as she walked to them. The air in the room shifted cooler now, heavier. "I left it open," she said. "On purpose." Otis said nothing. His jaw clenched, eyes steady. I've been embezzled, Evelyn continued. 4.2 million, by a man I called family. I filed the charges. FBI's involved now. But it's not the money that broke me. It's that I didn't see it coming, not from him. She turned her gaze to Mason. So I opened the safe, left it out, let the cameras roll, wanted to see if anyone would fail the test. Otis's expression didn't change, but his hand reached instinctively to rest on Mason's shoulder. Evelyn looked directly at the boy, and instead of stealing, "You cleaned." Mason blinked. It was messy. Otis spoke then. "Miss Hart, if this is— I'm not accusing you, Otis," she said, her tone surprisingly soft. "I'm thanking him." Otis blinked. "Ma'am." "You see, I thought I was testing you," Evelyn said. "But your son tested me back. He reminded me what integrity looks like." Silence filled the space between them. Then Mason, eyes wide, asked, "Am I in trouble?" Evelyn crouched to his level, brushing a strand of her sleek hair behind one ear. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You're the first reason in months I feel like trusting someone again." Otis exhaled, shoulders lowering. But Evelyn wasn't done. She stood up again and fixed her gaze on the man before her. "Otis Walker, who are you really?" He froze. Just for a second. "I'm the janitor," he said evenly. "No," Evelyn replied. "You're more than that. I don't know what yet, but I'm going to find out." The room fell silent again. Only the faint hum of the city below remained. And in that silence, something shifted, not just in Evelyn, but in the trajectory of all three lives standing in that office. Because what began as a test had just become a spark that would ignite everything that came next. The elevator doors slid open with a quiet ding, and Evelyn Hart stepped inside alone. Her reflection multiplied across the mirrored walls. She pressed the button for the basement level, not her usual route. But tonight wasn't usual, not after what she'd seen. As the elevator descended, her mind played the memory again. Mason's small hands organizing stacks of cash with reverence, not greed. His father's steady voice, that calm command. And the way Otis had looked at her when she asked, "Who are you really?" "I'm the janitor." A man who answered a loaded question with simplicity. Almost too simple. The doors opened into the soft hum of machinery, the faint scent of bleach and steel. The janitor's room was tucked behind a fire door marked only by a small silver plaque. She knocked, even though she had every right to walk in. It was Otis who opened the door. He looked surprised, but not startled. His posture was the same as always, upright, respectful, unmoved. "Hart," he said, stepping aside, "didn't expect you down here." "I didn't expect to come either," she replied, walking in. The room was clean, immaculate. Not in the way you'd expect from a man with access to industrial cleaners, but with order, purpose. A coffee mug sat beside a stack of folded microfiber cloths. A half-read paperback lay face down on a shelf. There were photos, 2 black and white ones of Mason, and another of a woman with a soft smile and tired eyes. "You're not here to fire me, are you?" he asked lightly. "I don't fire people who raise children like that." Otis didn't smile, but his eyes shifted slightly, almost a flicker of something unspoken. She turned, gesturing to the room. "It's too quiet down here. I've found quiet is underrated. You speak like someone who used to lecture." He met her eyes. "Some habits don't leave." There it was. Confirmation. Evelyn walked over to the paperback. The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. She ran a finger along its edge. "Professor," she asked gently, "once." "Let me guess." "Literature, philosophy, cultural anthropology," he answered. "Specifically, systems of resilience in marginalized communities." "You cleaned my boardroom last week," she said. "You straightened a chair I left crooked, and tonight your son sorted a safe full of temptation." He shrugged. "Some things are more valuable than a paycheck." She turned toward him again. "So why are you down here, Mr. Walker?" He looked past her toward the photo of the woman. "My wife was sick. Cancer. Aggressive. We caught it late because we didn't have insurance. I burned through every cent we had trying to save her, sold the house, pulled Mason out of school for a year when I couldn't afford both medication and tuition. And when she died, I didn't want to teach anymore. I couldn't stand in front of a classroom and talk about resilience while my life had fallen apart. Silence settled between them like dust. I applied for janitorial work because it was quiet, he said finally. No questions, no essays to grade, just work. Clean in, clean out. Evelyn stepped closer. But you didn't tell anyone. I didn't want pity, Otis replied. And no one asks the janitor questions they don't want to answer themselves. A beat passed. And Mason, she asked. He's the reason I still get up. Evelyn let that settle. He's remarkable. He's a mirror, Otis said. He reflects back what you pour into him. That's the most beautiful thing I've heard in months, she murmured. Otis gave a small nod. That's parenting. Even when you're on your knees, you try to look like a mountain. Evelyn looked at him, studying the lines around his eyes, the way he carried himself, not like a man beaten, but like one who had chosen stillness over despair. You said earlier you didn't expect me, he continued. So what changed? I watched your son pass a test that men with MBAs and yachts would have failed, she said. And I realized I've been surrounded by people with titles and degrees and zero character. Character, Otis echoed. It's expensive. Most folks don't realize that until they've traded it away for something cheaper. They stood there for a moment, two people from worlds apart, bonded by something more enduring than status truth. Evelyn straightened. I want to know you, Otis, not just your job, the man, your mind. His brow furrowed. Why? Because I run a company full of people with credentials and no compass, and I've learned that when the compass is gone, it doesn't matter where the map says you're going. She paused. Maybe I need to rebuild, not just departments, culture. And I can't do that with people who don't know how to lose and still stand up. Otis looked away for a moment. That sounds noble, Ms. Hart, but I'm not interested in being your redemption arc. She didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm asking you to help me build something better. Starting with truth. Finally, Otis exhaled and looked at her not as a CEO, but as a woman who'd cracked open. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I ask. She started to leave, but paused at the door. What do you tell Mason when life's unfair? She asked. Otis smiled, soft and sad. I tell him fairness isn't promised, but dignity is a choice. Evelyn didn't reply. She didn't need to. She simply walked out back to her tower of glass and steel, carrying something far heavier than she'd brought in. Dignity, truth, and the quiet realization that perhaps the janitor she'd overlooked was exactly the kind of man this company, and maybe even she, had been needing all along. You can't always clean up what's been spilled, but you can decide how you carry the stain. The words echoed from Otis's mouth just as Mason let out a panicked gasp. The sharp slap of a paper cup hitting glass rang through the executive lounge like a gunshot. Coffee exploded across the pristine glass board Evelyn had used in that morning's budget review, dripping like dark ink across spreadsheets, graphs, and a blueprint of next quarter's expansion. Mason stood frozen, gloved hands midair, eyes wide in horror. Dad! I didn't mean to. Otis had already moved, grabbing the industrial wipes from the janitor's cart, crouching with fluid, practiced calm. It's okay. Just paper and glass. But it's Ms. Hart's notes. Then we clean it like it's holy. From the hallway, a pair of heels approached crisp and fast. Helen, Kersey Evelyn's executive assistant, turned the corner holding her tablet. Her eyes landed on the scene, Otis wiping Coffee Mason, pale as chalk, and the spread of financial projections swimming in caffeine. Her brow lifted, but she didn't speak right away. She simply leaned against the doorframe and watched. Mason looked up. I'm sorry, ma'am. I was just reaching for my notebook. Helen stepped inside, her voice gentle. Mistakes happen, sweetheart. Let's see if anything's beyond saving. Otis paused, studying her with quiet surprise. Helen crouched beside him and helped lift one of the soggy pages. Besides, she added with a small smile, if the numbers are strong, they survive a little heat. Mason blinked at her. Then he smiled. Just a little. Helen looked over at Otis. "I didn't expect to see you on this floor tonight." "Rotation switch. One of the guys had a family emergency," he answered simply. "Of course," she said, then lowered her voice. "Evelyn knows, she doesn't yet, but I imagine she'll hear before morning." Helen stood, handed him a dry microfiber towel, and walked toward the elevator. She paused before stepping inside. "You're more than you let on, Mr. Walker." He said nothing. "I admire restraint," she added, "but secrets have a way of shining under fluorescent light." The doors slid closed. Later that night, after Evelyn returned from a charity gala where she'd pretended to care about wine she didn't drink and men she didn't trust, she paused outside her office. Something was different. There was a smell, bittersweet, faintly earthy. Coffee. She stepped in and saw the cleaned board. Everything wiped. Restored. Except a single sticky note had been left in the bottom corner, in handwriting unmistakably childlike. "Sorry, I spilled your important things. We tried to fix it. I hope it still helps your company. Mason, age 8. Evelyn stared at it for a long time. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. She walked to her desk and opened her laptop. A few keystrokes later, she was logged into the building's closed security archive. Not the general floor cams, the internal footage reserved for executive-level eyes only. Time code, 7:39 p.m. Playback, Mason reaching for a fallen notebook. The cup tipping. Otis's immediate reaction, Helen's calm entrance, Mason's apology, and the note, all of it captured. But Evelyn's eyes weren't on the action. They were on the man. The way Otis instinctively protected the boy not with panic, but with patience. How his tone never rose. How his hands moved with care even as anxiety crackled around them. It was a different kind of leadership, one she'd never seen in any boardroom. She leaned back in her chair and whispered aloud, "Who teaches a child to apologize for trying to help?" Then she remembered Otis's words. "Mason reflects back what you pour into him." The next morning, Evelyn called Helen into her office. "How's the board?" Helen asked, placing a fresh report on her desk. "Clean," Evelyn replied. "Better than it was before." Helen smirked slightly. "I assume you saw the footage." "I did. And I saw something else." She leaned forward. "I want everything we have on Otis Walker. Employment file, background check, initial application. Everything." Helen's eyebrows rose. "You want to fire him?" Evelyn looked up deadpan. "Do I look that stupid?" "No," Helen admitted. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I've seen something rarer," Evelyn said. "Decency that doesn't perform for applause." Helen nodded slowly. "I'll pull the files." A pause. "I also looked him up once," Helen added, "off the record. He came up blank in social media, no LinkedIn, no teaching history, just vanished from academia around 2016. Evelyn tilted her head. "He was a professor, I'm almost sure of it. His vocabulary, his posture, his ability to make silence feel full." Evelyn tapped her pen against the desk. "Why would someone like that choose to mop floors?" "Maybe the world made him choose," Helen said. "Or maybe he chose peace." There was a pause heavier than either of them expected. "Pull the file," Evelyn said again, quietly. That night, Mason returned to help his father again. Otis reminded him to be careful. Mason nodded, clutching a fresh notebook Evelyn had left for him, this one hardbound with his name engraved on the cover in gold leaf. Mason opened it eyes wide. A card fell out. "For the boy who knows the value of a clean page." E.H. Otis said nothing, but the way his fingers lingered on the card said everything. He looked up at the ceiling the way a man does when trying to hold back something he'd long buried. Mason looked up. "Dad, why are your eyes shiny?" Otis crouched and hugged his son close. "Because sometimes kindness feels heavier than grief." Mason tilted his head. "But it's a good heavy." Otis smiled, voice low. "The best kind, kiddo." The kind that tells you you're not invisible anymore. And in a company built on quarterly gains, glass towers, and guarded hearts, one man with a mop, a son with a golden notebook, and a CEO who had started watching people instead of numbers were about to change everything one honest moment at a time. Some people talk about values in boardrooms. Others live them over beans and rice. Evelyn Hart stood across the street from a weathered red brick apartment building on Chicago's South Side, her black town car idling behind her. The address Helen had handed her that morning was handwritten in ink so faint it looked like it was afraid to be seen. But Evelyn wasn't here out of pity. She was here because the numbers didn't make sense. Otis Walker's employment records were pristine. 0 infractions. Perfect attendance. No sick days. His original job application was basic, barely filled out. Education field. Some college. References, none available. No resume. No cover letter. And yet, the man spoke like a tenured professor and carried silence like a well-polished weapon. She stepped out of the car and approached the building. The intercom was cracked. She pressed the faded button labeled Walker. A few seconds passed. Then, "Yes, Mr. Walker, it's Evelyn Hart." A pause. "Are you in danger?" That made her blink. "No." Another pause. "Then you better come up before the chili burns." The door buzzed open. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. It smelled like cumin and slow-boiled onions. She knocked once and the door opened before her knuckles left the wood. Otis stood there in a gray t-shirt, faded jeans, barefoot. His eyes were curious but calm. "You came alone," he noted. "You strike me as someone who doesn't like an audience," she replied. A subtle grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Come in." The apartment was small but clean. Not tidy in the showroom way, tidy like someone cared. Bookshelves lined the living room wall filled with everything from Baldwin to Steinbeck to National Geographic back issues from the 90s. A second-hand keyboard sat in the corner, stickers peeling from the keys. Mason sat at a round table in the kitchen coloring with deep focus. He looked up and smiled. "Miss Evelyn," he chirped. "You found us." Otis shot him a look. Mason shrugged. "She gave me a notebook with my name on it. I figured she'd show up." Evelyn chuckled. "Smart kid." Mason beamed. "I get that from Dad." Otis cleared his throat. "Mace, go wash your hands. We're about to eat." Mason ran off, leaving Evelyn and Otis in the quiet hum of the kitchen. "I should have called," she said. "Probably," he replied. "But I'm not big on protocol." "Neither am I," she admitted. He gestured to a chair. "You're welcome to join us, if you're not scared of cornbread that came from a Jiffy box." She sat. "I've eaten at places with Michelin stars that left me empty." Otis poured water into mismatched glasses. "Then you're in the right place." Mason returned and slid into the seat beside her. "I get the corner piece," he declared. Otis smirked. "As always." Dinner was served without ceremony, chili thick with kidney beans rice that steamed in the center of the table and cornbread golden and imperfect. Evelyn, in her $1,000 blouse, looked down at the plate and realized she was hungrier than she thought. "You pray?" Otis asked gently. Evelyn hesitated. "I respect it. But no." Otis nodded, once closed his eyes, briefly whispered something inaudible, and dug in. The conversation was light at first. Mason talked about a science experiment at school, how baking soda made volcanoes erupt. Evelyn listened surprised at how easily the boy talked to her as if she were just another grown-up, not the woman who ran a billion-dollar empire. Then Mason said, between bites, "Miss Evelyn, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do rich people get scared too?" Otis looked up sharply, but Evelyn lifted a hand signaling it was okay. "Yes," she said, "all the time." "Really, money can buy a lot," she said carefully, "but it doesn't buy peace, or sleep, or knowing who to trust." Mason nodded serious. "Dad says people with too much sometimes forget how to be enough." Otis looked down. "I said that in a very different context." Evelyn smiled. Well, he remembered. They ate quietly after that. Halfway through the second helping, she asked Otis, "Why did you lie on your application?" He didn't look at her. I didn't lie. You said some college. You didn't mention a tenured teaching position. Publications? Awards? I said some college because the rest doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me, she said softly but firmly. Otis put his fork down. My wife, he began, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when Mason was just a toddler. We were uninsured. The treatments were experimental. I sold our house, cashed out every investment, took leave from the university. Eventually, they replaced me, and when she passed, there was nothing left of who I was. Evelyn didn't interrupt. People talk about resilience like it's heroic, he continued. But sometimes resilience is just getting up and making eggs while your whole world smells like death. I didn't want to lecture anymore. I didn't want to be Professor Walker. I just wanted to be a man who showed up, cleaned, came home to his boy, and slept without headlines. Mason looked at him with reverence. You became a different kind of teacher, Evelyn said. He met her eyes. No applause needed. She leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. That's exactly why you deserve it. Silence settled over the table like a blanket. Heavy, honest. When Evelyn finally stood to leave, Mason hugged her around the waist. You can come to dinner again, he said. Even if you're rich. Evelyn laughed. That's very generous of you. Otis walked her to the door. Thank you for not making tonight about anything more than what it was, he said. It was everything I didn't know I needed. As she stepped into the hallway, he said one last thing that stayed with her long after she returned to her high-rise. Some people lose everything and become bitter. Others lose everything and become better. My son deserves the second kind of man. And with that, he closed the door not to shut her out but to protect the peace they'd built behind it. What Evelyn didn't know was that across the city, in a much colder office with much harder walls, someone else had just noticed her growing interest in a certain janitor. And that man didn't like it one bit. You start rewarding janitors, and soon they'll think they're shareholders. The words hung in the air like the thick cigar smoke curling around Trent Malden's lips. He leaned back in the supple leather of the executive boardroom chair, tapping his gold Mont Blanc pen against the mahogany table like a metronome of disdain. The other VPs shifted uncomfortably, pretending to review documents that had nothing to do with the conversation. Evelyn Hart didn't flinch. Her arms were crossed, eyes locked on Trent's face, not in confrontation but in clinical observation, like watching a virus under a microscope. We reward character, she said, no matter where it mops. Trent smiled slowly, the kind of smile that people mistake for charm until it curdles at the edges. Character's nice in storybooks, Evelyn. In business, it gets you lawsuits. Or worse expectations. The room was quiet. Helen, seated 2 chairs to Evelyn's left, broke the silence. Mr. Walker's increased pay came out of the discretionary morale budget. Well, within HR protocol. Trent turned toward her. And who authorized it? I did, Evelyn said. He turned back. Of course you did. His voice was syrup, but the edges were glass. Careful, Trent. Evelyn said, tone calm but cutting. You're beginning to mistake your seat at the table for ownership of the floor beneath it. Trent's grin twitched. I'm just saying we have standards for a reason. Favoritism, even dressed as philanthropy, sets precedent. Today, it's a raise for the janitor. Tomorrow, it's... What? Bring your child to boardroom day. Evelyn leaned forward, her gaze ice cold. If my employees' children show more integrity than my executives, then yes, maybe we do bring them in. Silence fell again. Trent looked down, adjusted his cufflinks, then rose from his seat. Of course, he said smoothly. Just looking out for the health of the company. No, Evelyn said softly. You're looking out for your control. He didn't reply. But as he walked out of the room, his eyes burned with something ancient entitlement, maybe, or fear masquerading as arrogance. That night, in the quiet of his office, Trent sipped his 3rd bourbon and tapped through employee files. Otis Walker's photo stared back at him, a man with posture too proud for a mop, a man with a child who dared to smile at executives like they were neighbors. Trent didn't trust men who smiled in silence. He trusted leverage. He picked up his phone. Legal, he barked into the receiver. I want a review of all non-essential hires over the last 24 months, any undocumented adjustments in pay scale. Start with facilities, and pull footage of after-hours family presence in the building. I want eyes on janitorial personnel who bring guests. That's a security risk. A pause. And cross-check Walker's file with academic databases. He's hiding something. I can feel it. The next morning, Otis entered the back service corridor of the executive floor to find his cart moved. Not shifted, relocated entirely. A clipboard rested on top. Notice Janitorial Zone Audit. Effective immediately. He read it twice. Then again. A subtle warning. The kind that doesn't say you're not welcome here but makes sure you feel it anyway. He didn't flinch. Instead, he returned the cart to its rightful place. Some stains he knew were meant to be erased. Others needed to be framed. Later that week, Evelyn passed Otis in the hallway. She paused, turned back. "Did you move your cart yesterday?" she asked. "No, ma'am, I didn't think so." She studied his face. "They've started," he said quietly. She nodded. "Yeah, they'll come for you too, I know." Otis looked down the hallway, then back at her. "You sure you're built for this kind of storm?" Evelyn's answer was slow but resolute. "Not until recently." Otis nodded once. "Then stay close to the ground. Storms don't shake foundations, only crowns." She didn't smile, but her eyes flickered. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For being the only man in this building who tells me the truth without a price tag attached." Trent's next move came quietly. A printed memo posted by HR citing updated security protocols limiting non-staff access to the building after 6 p.m. No names, no blame. Just policy. Designed to look neutral. Designed to wound silently. Evelyn read it that afternoon standing beside Helen. "They think bureaucracy makes cowardice look official," she said. Helen tilted her head. "You want it pulled." "No," Evelyn said. "I want it documented." Helen raised an eyebrow. Evelyn looked at her. "Start logging everything. Every comment, every maneuver, every veiled threat. Time-stamped. Archived." Helen nodded. Understood. Then she asked softly, "You're not just protecting Otis, are you?" Evelyn looked out the window. "I'm protecting the idea of him." That night, Mason sat in the break room legs, swinging from the edge of the worn leather couch. He scribbled with colored pencils while Otis quietly restocked paper towels in the restroom across the hall. Trent entered like a cold wind, no greeting, no eye contact. Mason looked up. "Hello, sir?" Trent's eyes narrowed. "Doesn't your father know this isn't a daycare?" Mason blinked. "I'm not a baby." "No," Trent said, voice sharp. "But you're out of place." Mason tilted his head. "My dad says you don't have to fit in when you stand for something." Trent froze for half a breath, then smiled tightly. "Tell your father I said he's teaching rebellion, not respect." Otis appeared in the doorway, having heard enough. He walked to Mason, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Malden," he said evenly. "If you have concerns, I suggest you bring them to me." "Not my son." Trent turned toward him slowly. "Consider this your first warning." Otis didn't blink. "I'm not the one speaking to children like they're a threat." Trent stepped forward. "You forget your place, Walker." Otis didn't move. "No, sir. I remember exactly where I am. You just don't like that I'm still standing." Hours later, Evelyn reviewed the security footage from the break room. She watched Trent's expression shift from smugness to something darker. She paused, and the screen leaned back and whispered under her breath, "It's not the janitor who should be afraid." Because the war had begun, and this time the one holding the mop wasn't cleaning floors. He was drawing battle lines. "You know what they say about janitors, Trent." Malden muttered, his voice low, oily. "They're always just one locked door away from trouble." He said it to no one in particular, standing in the shadows of the executive corridor like a man playing chess alone. Only this board had pawns who didn't even know they were pieces. He turned the corner toward the security office. "Plant it tonight," he said to the guard beside him. "Lower drawer of the janitor's cart. Something small valuable, hard to explain." The guard hesitated. "Sir, with all due respect, that guy's clean. He's got a kid." Trent leaned in, close breath laced with scotch and condescension. "I don't need him dirty. I need him doubted." Otis walked into work that night with Mason by his side, the boy humming quietly, swinging a plastic lunchbox painted with planets. It was routine by now, Mason setting up his little homework station in the break room. Otis starting his rounds, pausing once per shift to check on his son and sneak him a Snickers when no one was looking. But something felt off. He could feel it in the way the cleaning cart wasn't where he left it. It sat 6 feet further down the hallway, slightly angled toward the wall like it had been rolled and abandoned. He paused, studied it, then gently lifted the top compartment. Nothing seemed out of place until he opened the lower drawer. Tucked between microfiber cloths was a small velvet pouch. Otis stared at it, his breath shallow. He knew that kind of pouch. He'd seen it 100 times in hotel ballrooms and corporate gifting events. Jewelry, high-end, expensive. He didn't touch it. Instead, he stepped back, pulled out his phone and snapped a photo time-stamped, then another with the pouch halfway exposed. Then he reached for the office intercom and called security. "Can you send someone up to the executive floor? We may have a misfiled item." 10 minutes later, 2 security guards and 1 HR rep stood around the cart. Evelyn arrived shortly after, summoned by Helen with a whisper, "Something's happening. You'll want to see it live." Otis stood silently as the pouch was opened. Inside, a diamond tennis bracelet. Easily $8,000, maybe more. Identifiable by serial number. Slipped into a janitor's cart like a coin into a wishing well, except this wish was meant to destroy. The HR rep looked confused. "Mr. Walker, where did you get this?" "I didn't," Otis replied calmly. "Found it when I came in. Took photos. Didn't touch it." "Anyone else use this cart?" Evelyn asked. "No one on schedule tonight but me." The room fell quiet. Helen's eyes were scanning, always scanning. Then she said softly, "Pull the hallway cam." 10 minutes later, in the security control room, they watched the footage together. Evelyn, Helen, Otis, and the head of security. Fast forward. Pause. Rewind. There it was. Timestamp 7:03 p.m. A figure in a charcoal suit walks down the hallway. Slows, looks both ways, bends casually beside the cart. Slip, pocket, walk. The clarity was grainy, but the gait, the build, the arrogance. Evelyn didn't need clearer footage. Trent Malden. Helen exhaled sharply. "That's his cufflink. He always wears that ridiculous gold knot pair. I've seen them for years." Otis said nothing. Evelyn stood in silence. Then finally, cut 2 copies of the footage, one for HR, one for legal, and one for me. "That's 3, ma'am," the guard said. She turned. "Then make 4, one more for when he lies." That night, Evelyn sat alone in her office, lights, dimmed city glittering beneath her. Otis knocked gently at the open door. She didn't look up. "Come in." He entered, hands folded in front of him. "I should have known," she said. "I gave him time and power and the benefit of the doubt. And in return, he tried to frame the one man I actually trust." Otis replied quietly, "Snakes don't become snakes when they bite you. They've always been snakes. You just stop pretending it's a rope." She looked at him then, her expression heavy with something between regret and admiration. "Why didn't you explode? Call it out, march into that boardroom and demand justice?" Otis shrugged. "Because anger doesn't make truth louder. It just makes it harder to hear." Evelyn stood, walked to her desk, picked up a folder and handed it to him. Inside, a proposal, an internal position, title, Director of Culture and Ethics. Otis blinked. "This is real," she said, "and yours if you want it. I need someone who knows what integrity looks like at the bottom floor before we try to fix the top." He looked at the paper for a long moment. Then, quietly, "What if the board pushes back?" "They will," she replied. "And Trent," she smiled. "Snakes don't scare me anymore." Otis met her gaze, then said slowly, "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," she said. "But you've earned all of it." He nodded once. "I'll think about it." She stepped closer. "That's all I ask." "And Otis, yes, I'm not offering this because of what happened tonight. I'm offering it because I want to build something with people who know how to carry storms without becoming them." Otis gave a soft, measured smile. "Then maybe it's time to stop cleaning around the mess and start clearing it out." Meanwhile, across the city in his corner condo, Trent Malden stared at a blinking notification on his phone. Access restricted. Executive privileges under audit. His jaw clenched. He picked up the remote and rewound the nightly news. The screen froze on a headline, "CEO Evelyn Hart introduces new internal ethics division," amid speculation of culture shift at Hart Enterprises. And beneath that, a janitor's quiet integrity may have sparked a revolution from the ground up. Trent hurled the glass against the wall, because the man he tried to erase had just become the most dangerous figure in the building, a man with nothing to hide, and nothing left to fear. Some men climb the ladder to lead. Others just want a better view to step on the ones below. The boardroom was unusually quiet, not the kind of quiet filled with anticipation or respect. No, this was the tight, loaded silence of men in suits realizing something was about to break, and they weren't sure if they'd be standing when it did. At the head of the table, Evelyn Hart stood with her back straight and her eyes sharp like a scalpel, not a sword. In front of her, the sleek black screen flickered to life, casting a cold glow across the polished table. Every seat was filled. The full executive board, legal, HR, Helen seated calmly beside a closed laptop, and finally, Trent Malden arms, folded, jaw clenched just tight enough to crack a molar. Evelyn didn't begin with small talk. She never did. "I want to start today by addressing the recent security breach that occurred last week," she said, voice even resonant. Trent shifted slightly. "I thought this meeting was about budget review." "No," she said. "It's about value." She clicked the remote in her hand. The screen lit up with a time-stamped video. Black and white. Low angle, a hallway. Then a man in a charcoal suit entering frame. Walking. Pausing. Bending beside a janitor's cart. A flash of movement. Trent's hand. The velvet pouch. The room tensed as the footage played out in damning silence. When it ended, Evelyn set the remote down. Trent laughed just once. A short, bitter burst. "That's not proof. That's surveillance ambiguity, shadows, and assumptions." "You're right," Evelyn said, stepping closer. "Which is why I brought more." Helen opened the laptop beside her, projecting a second video, different angle, sharper resolution. Same timestamp. Trent's face clear, his cufflink gleaming. Then, click, plant, walk. The silence returned, but this time it carried weight. "Are we really doing this?" Trent scoffed, looking around. "Are we seriously entertaining the idea that I planted evidence to frame a janitor?" "You framed a man," Evelyn corrected. "A father. A veteran educator. A survivor. A man who's done more for this company's culture than you've done with all your suits and spreadsheets. You're making this personal." "No," she said, stepping forward. "You did. When you made a child feel like a threat. When you weaponized policy to punish humility. When you tried to destroy someone who had the one thing you'll never fake: decency." Trent stood abruptly, palms flat on the table. "This is outrageous. You think you can publicly crucify me on a hunch and some edited security footage I've given this company 15 years of loyalty." Evelyn leaned in, her voice low, deadly calm. "Loyalty without integrity is just control." Then she straightened, clicked again. This time, an audio clip began to play. Trent's voice, clearly recorded from a conversation in the parking structure 2 nights earlier. "Walker's been getting too comfortable. We need to remind people like him where they belong." Then plant something, enough to get him removed. No one questions a theft, especially not from someone with no connections. The sound stopped. No one breathed. Trent's face paled. Evelyn turned to the board. Let the record show that not only did Mr. Malden conspire to fabricate evidence, but he did so with racially coded language and malicious intent. Trent's voice cracked desperate now. You think this won't come back on you? You think I won't sue? I own shares. You own shame, Evelyn cut in, and that's about to become very public. Helen rose from her seat and handed a document to legal. This is the formal motion to remove Mr. Malden from the board with just cause, accompanied by immediate suspension of privileges and internal investigation pending civil proceedings. Legal nodded. All documentation has been reviewed and verified. There is no legal barrier to termination. Trent looked around the table, but found no allies. Only silence, discomfort, and averted eyes, because no one wanted to be near a man who just got caught trying to burn down the house from the inside. Security entered the room quietly. Trent stepped back. You're going to regret this, he said to Evelyn. All of you. You're replacing experience with a janitor. Evelyn didn't blink. No, I'm replacing corruption with character. The guards escorted him out. He didn't look back. When the door shut behind him, Evelyn turned to the board. For too long, this company has protected power over people. That ends now. She paused. Otis Walker has accepted the role of Director of Culture and Ethics. He will report directly to me. Effective immediately. There were murmurs, mixed reactions, surprise, unease, curiosity, but no objections. Because after what they had just witnessed, not a single voice dared stand against what was now undeniably right. Downstairs, Otis stood in front of the building, arms folded, watching Mason eat ice cream from a plastic cup. He hadn't wanted to go upstairs. He didn't want revenge. He wanted quiet, but justice. That was different. The front doors opened. Evelyn walked out. Otis raised an eyebrow. Is it done? She nodded. He's gone. Otis sighed. Some people leave a room and take the poison with them. Others leave it behind. Evelyn smiled. You didn't leave anything behind. You brought something in. Something we forgot we needed. Otis looked down at Mason, who was now using the plastic spoon as a drumstick on the bench. Kids like him, Otis said, see everything, but they only believe what we live. Evelyn sat beside him. I want to live better, she said. I want this company to live better. Otis glanced at her, then back at the building. Then, let's get to work. That night, a memo went out company-wide. New leadership announcement. Otis Walker, Director of Culture and Ethics. Because character isn't just a department, it's our foundation. And in break rooms and cubicles and elevators across Hart Enterprises, people whispered. About the janitor who never raised his voice. About the boy who never took a dollar he didn't earn. About the CEO who started watching more than just profit margins. And slowly, something changed. Not in policy, not in structure, but in spirit. Because sometimes it only takes one good man to sweep away everything that's wrong. It's not the loudest voice that changes the world. Sometimes it's the quietest note written in crayon. Evelyn Hart was halfway through her second cup of black coffee when Helen stepped into her office holding a single piece of paper creased in the corners, the top edge slightly torn as if it had been removed from a notebook with small, impatient hands. Mail delivery? Evelyn asked dryly, glancing up. Helen smiled and shook her head. It was taped to my door this morning. Evelyn raised a brow. Helen placed the paper gently on her desk. You might want to read it. Evelyn picked it up. The handwriting was large, uneven. Half the letters leaned forward, some backward. But the words were unmistakable, so raw, they felt like they'd been written straight onto the page without passing through logic or filter. Just Hart. Dear Miss Evelyn, my name is Mason Walker. But you already know that because you gave me a notebook with my name on it, and my dad said that means something. I just wanted to say thank you for helping my dad. He always helps other people, but he doesn't like when people help him. I think it makes his heart tired. But when you made that bad man go away, my dad started to smile more. Not the big smiles, but the kind that stay in his eyes after he stops laughing. I don't know what Director of Ethics means, but I think it means he gets to tell the truth out loud now. Thank you for believing in my dad. And thank you for seeing him. He sees everybody, even when they're trying to hide. Your friend Mason, age 8, Evelyn, didn't speak for a long time. She stared at the page, blinking slowly as if it might vanish if she looked away. It wasn't just the words, it was the simplicity. The way children told the truth with no thought of consequence, just the unvarnished belief that goodness should be acknowledged. Helen sat across from her. I wasn't sure if it would make you cry or punch something. Evelyn chuckled quietly. Bit of both. She folded the letter, carefully smoothing the creases. This needs to be seen, she said. Helen nodded. Want me to email it to internal communications? No, Evelyn said. I'm going to read it. At tomorrow's all hands. Helen tilted her head. You sure? Evelyn looked out the window. People don't follow numbers. They follow meaning. And that letter, that's meaning in its purest form. The next morning, the auditorium was packed. The quarterly all-hands meeting was usually a dry affair, slides. Metrics polite applause. But today, Evelyn had sent out a cryptic message that simply read, Come early, come open. She stepped onto the stage, no slides behind her, no microphone clipped to her blazer. Just a simple handheld mic and a folded piece of paper in her hand. I was going to start today with an update on Q3 targets, she began. But I received something that reminded me why those targets matter or don't. She unfolded the letter, and she read it. Every word. No dramatics, no inflection. Just the quiet voice of an 8-year-old boy echoing through the room. By the time she reached the final line, he sees everybody. Even when they're trying to hide, there wasn't a sound in the auditorium. Not a cough, not a shift in a seat, just stillness. She looked up. That she said holding up the letter is the culture I want. That's the leadership I admire. That's what Hart Enterprises will be from this point forward. There was no applause at first. Just a wave of silence that rolled through the room, grounding everyone like gravity. And then, slowly, hands began to clap. A few at first, then dozens, then hundreds. Not a roar, but something steadier, something real. Downstairs in the newly renovated ethics office, a modest, glass-walled room just outside Evelyn's own Otis sat behind a desk he hadn't asked for, reading the new company handbook. A soft knock pulled his attention. It was Helen. She stepped in and placed a framed copy of Mason's letter on his desk. Otis blinked. What's this? Helen smiled. A reminder of why you're here. Otis looked at the paper glass protecting its soft pencil lines and misspelled words. This boy, he said quietly, he deserves a world that doesn't make kindness feel like a risk. Helen nodded. So, you build that world. One policy at a time. He looked up. You believe in that. I believe in people who still cry when a kid says thank you. Otis chuckled deep and warm. I didn't cry. Helen raised a brow. You blinked really hard. He smiled, then grew serious. Is the company ready? Helen hesitated. Maybe not, but they're watching, and they're listening now. Otis leaned back. Then we speak carefully, but we speak truth. That evening, as Otis and Mason walked home under a sky streaked with lavender and gold, Mason skipped ahead on the sidewalk. Did she read it? He called. Otis nodded. She did. To everybody. Every single person. Mason beamed. Did they like it? Otis smiled. They didn't clap for the words. They clapped for the heart. Mason grinned. I worked hard on that. I even spelled ethics right the second try. Otis laughed. That's because you meant it. Mason paused, thoughtful. Yeah, bud. Do you think I could have a job like yours one day? Otis looked down at him. You already do, he said. You just use crayons instead of policy. Mason nodded. I think I'm going to keep writing letters. You should. Why? Otis put a hand on his son's shoulder. Because the world doesn't need louder voices, Mason. It needs braver ones. And together, they walked into the evening, one step at a time, toward a world quietly shifting beneath their feet. I used to think the floor I mopped was beneath me. Turns out, it was holding everything up. Otis Walker sat quietly at the edge of the rooftop terrace, legs crossed, sleeves rolled to the elbows, a gentle breeze lifting the edges of his shirt. Below him, the city pulsed with life cars inching like ants, windows blinking gold and blue as twilight settled in. It had been 3 weeks since the boardroom confrontation. 3 weeks since a man who wielded power like a weapon had been removed and a man who carried humility like armor had been elevated. And yet Otis still felt like he was waiting for the catch. Evelyn Hart approached with 2 steaming cups of coffee. She didn't ask if he wanted one. She just handed it to him and sat beside him, heels clicking against the concrete. Colombian roast. "No sugar," she said. He smiled slightly. "You remember?" "I remember a lot more than you think," she replied, sipping her own. They sat in silence for a while, then Evelyn spoke. "You know, when I was 12, I overheard my father tell his accountant, 'Empathy is a liability.'" He said it like he was quoting scripture. Otis looked at her. "Do you believe that?" "Now I used to," she admitted, "until a janitor and his son reminded me that trust isn't given, it's earned, and sometimes it's paid forward in silence." He turned to face her. "You didn't come up here to talk about your father." "No," she said, "I came to ask if you're ready." "For what?" "To stop hiding." Otis exhaled slowly. "I'm not sure the world's ready for a janitor to teach ethics in a boardroom," she smiled. "That's exactly why I'm offering it to you." He looked away. "Evelyn, I'm good at quiet. I'm good at cleaning messes that don't belong to me. What you're asking me to do, it's visible. Permanent. It's necessary," she said. "You once told me that your son reflects what you pour into him. What if this company could be the same?" Otis chuckled under his breath. "That's poetic." "It's not poetry," she replied. "It's policy. It's legacy." He turned to her, eyes more serious now. "What happens when the headlines fade and the applause dies down, when the first real test comes and I say something the board doesn't want to hear?" She didn't blink. "Then I'll stand beside you, even if we're the only 2 standing." He searched her face for a lie. Found none. "Director of Culture and Ethics," he said aloud, testing the weight of it. "Full autonomy. Your own budget. You'll report directly to me." "You sure about that?" She sipped her coffee. "I'm not sure about much these days, but I'm sure about you." Otis leaned back, stared at the stars just starting to dot the sky. "When I taught at the university," he said quietly, "I once had a student tell me that I made him feel like his voice had weight. Not volume weight. Like it meant something. I never forgot that. And now, he said, I want every single person who walks through our doors, whether they wear suits or carry mops, to feel the same." Evelyn reached into her blazer and pulled out an envelope. He didn't take it at first. She laid it gently beside his coffee cup. "There's no deadline," she said, "but I hope you'll say yes." As she stood to leave, he called after her. "Evelyn," she turned. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not fixing me," he replied. "For just seeing me," she smiled. "Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone is stop looking past them." 2 days later, Otis walked into the company's internal leadership seminar. The room was filled with mid-level managers, HR partners, and newer employees from every corner of the company. And in the back row, Mason sat beside Helen, his feet swinging a juice box in one hand, wide eyes locked on his father at the podium. Otis cleared his throat. No slides, no script. He simply began. "I've been in this building for 3 years. Most of that time I was invisible by design. And if I'm being honest, I liked it that way." A few quiet chuckles. "But visibility," he continued, "isn't the same as presence. You can be seen every day and still not be known. And that's the sickness we never talk about in companies, how we reward performance polish and pedigree, but rarely character." He let that sit. "Then, leadership isn't about being right. It's about doing right, especially when no one's clapping, especially when it costs something." People shifted in their seats now, leaning forward. "I took this role because I've cleaned the floors of this place, and I've watched how people treat the ones who clean. So we're going to talk about dignity, not just diversity. We're going to teach inclusion that doesn't end with a poster. And we're going to raise a generation of professionals who know the name of the janitor and the receptionist before they memorize the quarterly goals. Applause. Real, rising, resonant. Mason clapped the hardest. That night in their modest kitchen, Mason handed Otis a paper crown he had made with gold foil and tape. "What's this?" Otis asked. "You're the king of good guys," Mason said. Otis smiled, placing the crown gently on his head. "Well, Your Majesty," Evelyn said from the doorway holding a bottle of sparkling cider, "I believe a toast is in order." They all laughed. And as plastic cups were filled and dreams began to take shape, not the loud kind, but the rooted kind, Otis looked at his son, then at Evelyn. "This doesn't feel like winning," he said. Evelyn raised her cup. "That's because it's not. It's building. And what are we building?" Mason asked, wide-eyed. Otis placed a hand over his heart. "Something that lasts." "Do you think they'll still remember my name when I'm gone?" Otis asked the question softly, barely above the hum of the old radio playing Billie Holiday in the corner of their kitchen. He sat at the table, smoothing the edges of a worn photo of Mason's kindergarten graduation. His hands, once calloused and used to scrubbing floors, now held paper and policies, but the weight they carried hadn't lessened. Evelyn, leaning against the doorway with a mug of tea, didn't answer right away. She studied him, how his brow furrowed not from insecurity but from something deeper. Legacy. Meaning. "They won't have to remember your name," she said, walking over. "They'll live inside what your name built." Otis looked up. "Sometimes it still feels like I snuck into a place I wasn't supposed to be." "You didn't sneak in," she replied gently. "You held the door open long enough for people to see it was broken, and then you fixed it." The new ethics initiative, titled Project Hands Worth Holding, launched on a stormy Monday morning. Posters went up. Workshops began. But it wasn't the branding that changed the culture. It was the quiet, consistent ripple effect of Otis Walker showing up. He didn't walk in with slogans. He walked in with stories. He met with each department not in boardrooms but in break rooms. He asked the questions no one had ever bothered to ask. What's the hardest part of your day? Who gets thanked the least? What's something you wish leadership understood? And he listened, really listened. From the cafeteria workers to the IT interns, people began to realize they weren't just being acknowledged, they were being heard. And when someone is heard, they begin to believe they matter. One afternoon, as Otis passed the glass wall of the CEO's corner office, he spotted something that made him stop. Evelyn was standing alone, hands on the edge of her desk, staring at a framed photo. He knocked lightly. "You okay?" She looked up, startled. "Yeah. Just memories." He stepped inside, noting the photo. It was of her and her father years ago. He was young and sharp in a gray suit, she just a girl clinging to his side. He was brilliant, she said. Cold, but brilliant. He built this empire from nothing, but he never made space for softness. Not once. "You're rewriting that," Otis said. She turned to him. "Am I?" He nodded. "You're building something that can breathe." Evelyn sat down, visibly tired. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough for this next phase, to undo what he wired into this place." Otis pulled a chair beside her. Strength doesn't mean being unbreakable. It means choosing to rebuild with cracks still showing. That's how the light gets in. She smiled faintly. "That sounds like something my therapist would charge me $100 to hear." He chuckled. "Yours, too." That Friday, Otis brought Mason to work for Legacy Day, a new initiative he proposed where employees could bring their children to learn not about power, but purpose. Mason, wide-eyed and full of questions, followed his father into every corner of the building. He asked about the dizzy chairs in the HR office, sampled every snack in the vending machine row, and even tried on a headset in the call center. But the moment that etched itself into everyone's mind came during the closing ceremony. Each department was invited to write one sentence on a card. "What legacy means to me?" The cards were displayed in the atrium, hanging like leaves from a large wooden sculpture shaped like an open hand. Otis stepped up to the podium with Mason beside him. "I wasn't always proud of the job I had here," he began, voice calm but resonant. Not because the work wasn't honorable, but because I believed my worth was tied to the title I'd lost. He glanced down at Mason, who was gripping his card tightly. But then my son said something that changed everything. He said, "Dad, I like when you mop. It makes the floor shiny and people stop slipping." The audience chuckled gently. See, he didn't care what people called me. He cared that I helped people move safely. Otis stepped aside. Mason looked up at the crowd, then slowly read his card aloud. Legacy means making people feel safe, even if they don't know it's you. Silence. Then a wave of soft clapping swelling into a standing ovation. Even the most polished executives found themselves wiping the corners of their eyes. And Evelyn, standing at the back, arms crossed, tears glistening, whispered, "That boy's going to change the world." Helen beside her smiled. "He already has." That night back home, Otis tucked Mason into bed. "Did I do good today?" Mason asked, eyes half-lidded. "You didn't just do good, buddy. You reminded grown-ups what good even means." Mason yawned. "I like it when people listen to you." Otis brushed a hand through his son's curls. "You know what's even better? What when they listen to you?" As Otis stepped outside onto the porch, Evelyn sat waiting on the top step, 2 mugs of tea steaming beside her. "You didn't have to stay," he said, surprised. "I didn't want to leave," she replied. They sat in silence for a long while, just the night around them, soft, quiet, alive. "Do you ever think," she asked, "that maybe the legacy we chase isn't made of buildings or books or money?" Otis looked at her. "Maybe it's just the people we give courage to when they needed it most." He didn't reply. He just reached over, gently took her hand in his. No titles, no contracts, no performance reviews, just a man who once cleaned floors and a woman who once built walls sitting together finally on common ground. And in the hush between them something unspoken began to bloom. Not loud, but lasting. The auditorium was hushed. Not the kind of hush that begged for silence, but the kind that settled deep in your chest. The kind that came before something sacred. A banner hung high above the polished stage National Symposium on Character and Compassion in Youth Education. On the stage behind a podium too tall for him stood a boy in a navy blazer, 11 years old. Sandy brown hair brushed neatly to the side, eyes steady, braver than they had any right to be. Mason Walker. He cleared his throat, the mic picking up the soft scratch of nervousness. Then he smiled, small, unforced. "Hi. My name's Mason. I'm not here because I'm the smartest kid or the fastest or anything like that. I'm here because once, when I was little, I saw my dad do something most people would have walked right past." In the second row, Evelyn Hart sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap. Her hair had grown longer since stepping down from the CEO role. Softer now. The hard lines on her face had eased, but her eyes, sharp and wide, shimmered as they watched the boy speak. Beside her, Helen reached over wordlessly and gently took her hand. "My dad used to clean floors," Mason continued, "but I always thought he was bigger than the buildings he worked in. One night, when I was 8, we were cleaning a big office tower downtown. I saw a pile of money, like stacks of it, left out in a room." He paused, drawing a soft ripple of laughter from the audience. "I didn't touch it. I thought about it. But I remembered something my mom used to say before she passed. She told me, 'If it isn't yours, don't even breathe on it.' So I put the money back in place and told my dad." Behind the curtain, Otis Walker stood alone in the wings watching. He wore a dark blazer, not new, but clean and pressed. His hands were folded in front of him and his posture was relaxed. But his eyes, they were shining. He didn't blink as Mason spoke, as if he were afraid the moment might vanish if he looked away for even a second. "That night changed everything," Mason said. "Not because we got rich or anything like that. We didn't. But someone saw it. Someone saw who my dad really was." He looked down, took a deep breath, then raised his head. And they gave him a chance. Not because he had the right resume, but because he had the right heart. The silence deepened. "My dad says something I never understood before. He says, being good when no one's watching is what makes you truly strong. I used to think that meant being tough, but now I think it means being kind, even when it costs you. Choosing honesty when nobody would know if you didn't. A long pause. Mason scanned the crowd. And because of that, a lot of people got chances, like me. I got to go to a better school. I got to meet people who listen when I talk. I got to believe I mattered. And now, I want to be the kind of person who gives that back. In the wings, Otis exhaled long and slow. He didn't notice he'd been holding his breath. A soft, unspoken warmth swelled in his chest, heavy and light at the same time. He didn't need applause. The moment itself was enough, but the applause came anyway. It began as a single clap, then another. Then the room erupted. A standing ovation thundered to life, wave after wave of hands honoring not just a speech but something deeper, something honest and rare. Evelyn rose slowly, her hands trembling. She clapped. Then she cried. Not like the hard tears of her past, these were quiet, cleansing, the kind of tears that softened jagged edges time had carved in silence. Helen wiped her own cheek, laughing through her sniffles. "I told you," she whispered, "that boy would break us all." After the event, as the crowd filtered out into the autumn air, Evelyn found Otis near the back exit. He was waiting alone, eyes watching the horizon, hands tucked in his coat pockets like always. "You never liked the spotlight," she said gently. He smiled sideways. "Never needed it." "You heard what he said?" Otis nodded. "I did." He meant every word. "I know he said. That's what scares me." Evelyn tilted her head, curious. "It means I have to keep living up to it," he added. "Turns out being someone's hero is a full-time job." She laughed, a full, unguarded sound. "You always were, Otis. You just didn't know it." He glanced at her. "Neither did you." For a beat, they stood in the quiet. The air smelled faintly of maple leaves and city stone. Mason ran up a moment later holding a paper cup of cocoa and his speech notes, eyes glowing. "Dad?" he grinned. "Did I mess up the last part?" Otis bent down, adjusting his son's collar. "No, bud. You didn't mess up a thing. You told the truth. That's more than most men ever do in a lifetime." Mason looked up at Evelyn. "Do you think it helped anyone?" Evelyn knelt to his level, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I think it reminded everyone what courage really looks like." Mason beamed, then turned to Otis and said, "I think I want to be a teacher someday, like you used to be." Otis smiled. "Then you'd better start paying attention to punctuation." Mason groaned. "Dad!" They laughed real, unfiltered laughter, the kind that felt like home. As they walked off toward the parking lot, Mason skipping ahead, Evelyn turned back for one last glance at the building behind them. On the banner beneath the symposium's title, someone had scribbled a quote from Mason's speech. "Being good when no one's watching is what makes you truly strong." Evelyn took a breath, let it settle deep in her lungs. A new story had begun, but this one would stay. Sometimes it's not the loudest voices, but the quietest actions that echo the longest. Otis never asked to be seen, but because he stayed true when no one was watching, his story didn't just change a company, it lit a path for a generation, and maybe, just maybe, that path leads here to you. Where are you watching from tonight? Is there someone in your life like Otis whose quiet strength deserves to be honored? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your story might just inspire someone else who's listening right now. And if this story moved you even just a little, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are more stories coming, stories that heal, that remind us what still matters, and that prove the smallest acts of honesty can leave the biggest legacy. Thank you for spending this time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay true, and never underestimate the worth of honest hands.